What's up everybody, welcome back to the channel. I am Demarius Jackson, and in today's video we're going to talk about how I practice as a woodwind doubler. And it's really more so how I practice as a woodwind instrumentalist. So when I have a saxophone in my hand, I'm a saxophonist. When I have a clarinet in my hand, I'm a clarinetist, etc, etc. You hopefully get the drift. But before we get into that practice routine, I really should talk about the beginnings of it and how I started off playing these instruments, and let you know that I didn't practice this way from the get-go. So my primary instrument, or the first woodwind that I played, was the saxophone. That's what I went to school for my undergrad for, was saxophone performance. My first semester I took clarinet lessons, and then the next semester flute and oboe and etc, etc, and it became a little bit of a woodwind obsession for me. So in those beginning formative years, my saxophone teacher was actually a woodwind doubler. He has his DMA from the University of North Texas in woodwind doubling, and he was a big influence on me in pursuing playing multiple woodwinds. And moving on years later, even up till now, I've always tried to find a teacher on that particular instrument. So my flute teacher is primarily a flute player, my clarinet teacher is primarily a clarinet player, etc, etc. So during those formative years, I put a good amount of time into each of the woodwinds. I would probably say I would practice anywhere from 4 to 6 hours a day, at a minimum 2 hours on my primary, and then the another 2 hours on the double, split up between which ones I'm concentrating on the time. But my practice routine now is a little bit different, where I'm in a kind of a maintenance phase and then improving very slowly on all the other woodwinds, including saxophone phase of my life. So let's start off with that practice routine. So I have two different routines of what instruments that I start on. And so what I mean by that is coming up, I would always have this conflict in my mind. Should I start on flute because it's more sensitive, and then move to clarinet and saxophone to get, so I don't lose that sensitivity in my flute playing, and move on to the larger mouthpiece instruments? Hopefully that makes sense. Or should I start on saxophone and move reverse? So in order to eliminate all those questions, I just have 2 days. So on, we'll call it day A, I'll start on flute, then I'll play a little bit of piccolo at the end. I always try to play piccolo, both of them at the same practice session. And then clarinet, and then saxophone, and then oboe there at the end. And then to reverse it, on day B, I'll start off on saxophone, clarinet, flute, piccolo, and then oboe once again at the end there. And sometimes I like to throw a mixture of practice into my routine. So we could almost even call this a day C. On those days, I actually just practice like 5 to 10 minute spurts on each instrument in a round robin fashion. And what I practice, I'll talk about here soon, but say I'll practice 5 to 10 minutes on saxophone, then I'll switch to flute, switch to clarinet, just because I kind of want to have that experience. I really like playing in musical theater, pit orchestras, and you have to be used to switching instruments quickly. You don't want to have that sensitivity thing be an excuse or an issue to why you can't come in piano on flute at a high E or something crazy like that. So let's talk about flute. And this may sound a little crazy, but this is just something that I do. When I put my instrument together, and it doesn't take that long to put it together, but I try to have whatever instrument that I'm about to play, music playing in the background. So I find a professional flute CD or whatever it may be. Most recently it was Catherine Kimmler, and I'll have that playing in the background while I put the flute together. One of the reasons I do this is mainly because I found that if I could internalize a tone, I'll have a better idea of what I'm kind of aiming for. When I first started playing as a doubler, I would just play the flute and kind of rely on what I've heard in, concert band, or just really on whatever I've heard in the past, and that I found that that's not enough. So I'll play a little bit of flute in the background while I get it together. One thing that stayed consistent in my practice routine was practicing the Finnell Gobert. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. I got this book up in the New England Conservatory of Music, like at one of the stores there, and it's been an excellent resource. Everybody knows this one routine that if you played a flute, you've heard it before. It's one of the first exercises in the book. I'll practice that every single day. It sounds like this. And being a saxophonist, I would always advocate that first exercise in the Finnell Gobert. One, to get this pinky finger action going on, because this is kind of a weird thing to do, at least it was for me, and not playing my F sharp like that. So if you're a saxophonist, please don't do that. Nice and slow is how I've come to do it over the years. I'm still working on it myself, but it's become easier the more that I practice. And another thing that I practice, I actually got from a mentor, a teacher of mine in Virginia Beach named Jim Nesbitt. If you have this book, it's on page 130, but it's kind of like a lip slur exercise. I found that I had a lot of issues skipping octaves and doing intervals greater than an octave. I had issues getting my aperture right on flute and having those notes sound, so that's a great exercise to work on. And another great tip that I got from a flute player, I had issues, and I still have issues, playing softly in the upper register, that third register of the flute. So the flute teacher advised for me to try to do overtones really, really soft, and kind of do like you do on saxophone with overtone matching, having that bottom note match the top note, just really, really soft. And it is literally, I feel muscles working that I didn't even know I had in my mouth and my forehead. Is crazy. But that's one thing that I'll continue to work on as well. And once that's over, I always like to end my flute session with some improvising. It can be anything from a real book. I've been working on wave just because I think Latin music sounds really good on flute. So I'll play a couple of bars of that and move on to piccolo. So with piccolo, I'm honestly just trying to be able to get a sound out of the thing. So I'll play some arpeggios to get my fingers moving. It's such a small instrument, I almost feel more nimble on it than I do flute. It's strange, but it's true. And I also practice the Stars and Stripes Forever solo. As you know, I am in the United States Marine Corps, and I don't ever have to play it personally because I mostly conduct nowadays. But I do like to be able to play that. I don't know, little things, I guess. I'm going to perfect it one day. All right, moving on to clarinet. The goal on clarinet is to sound like a clarinetist, not a saxophone player playing clarinet. And a lot of that has to do with the flat chin and a high tongue position. So I'll practice long tones first and foremost, just 4 bars, going up chromatically all the way up to high G. And once that's done, I'll go through this Behrman complete method for clarinet. I am honestly still working my way through it, but I try to get as far as I can, and if I'm missing something or if I'm messing up, it's a typical practice session for me. I usually just stop with whatever scale that is and just hammer it down for however long it takes. I could probably work on that for 30 minutes on one thing. And once those scales are over, I actually do up downs. I'll leave a link to a video that I did on it somewhere up here at the top of the screen. But this is a great exercise. I like it because you can practice going over the bridge and using alternate fingerings on clarinet. Really good exercise. And then last but not least, I'll try to work on an etude. I'm actually working out of all these Rose etudes and caprices. So I really like this book. It has all 3 books kind of in one. And I'm working on number 2. Let me see what this is from the 32 etudes. 32 Rose etudes. There we go. And then next up, I have saxophone. So on saxophone, my goals, I call them almost like periods, where I'll work on one concept for a very, very long time. So I have a whole warm-up routine. I'll leave a link to that somewhere up in the video as well. But I'll go through some finger technique things because I've noticed when I actually look at myself playing, my fingers are kind of a little bit more wild than I like them to be. So a lot of those exercises that I have in the video are good for really concentrating on where you place your fingers and finger motion and motion. Economy of motion is probably a better word for it as you go through the scale routine. So once I'm done with that, the concept that I'm working on now is more altissimo based. So I heard a great saxophonist by the name of Ben Van Gelder. His altissimo range is, oh, it's killing. Everything is so fluid. It's not one of those things where you play a lick, you know, in the horn register and it's bam, one random high note. Everything is so fluid. So what I've been working on are scales and arpeggios in the altissimo, starting from the lower registers and going into altissimo and making it really, really fluid. So these are the seasons. I'm in a season of altissimo right now. So that's honestly, other than the warm-up, that's the primary thing that I work on. And then of course I'll end every session with some improvising or some ear training. I'll try to do one of the 7 licks series, link somewhere up there. But the 7 lick series, that brings to light a lot of deficiencies in my playing and in my ears. So that's one of the things that I work on as well. And last but not least, the hot boys. I know it's not pronounced that way. The oboe. So this is the weakest of all of my woodwinds by far. I play on a plastic reed. I don't know how to make reeds. I am going to learn how to adjust them at a minimum. I honestly don't have the desire to learn how to make them because I don't play that much oboe. I want to be able to be proficient on the instrument. I'll always start off with scales of some sort to get them under my fingers, and then there's always a question that comes up, like if I'm experimenting with like chromatic scale or major scale, it's always a question of, oh, how do I get from C sharp or F sharp to G sharp, or from one note to another, basically. So I'll go find the answer to that, and then that's what I'll practice that day. And then this is a slow process, and I'll try to continue it on subsequent days when I practice the oboe. And then after that, I have this book right here, Concert and Contest Selections. Very, very simple tunes. I say simple and I struggle to play them, but slightly simple tunes for me to work on. And I'll go through one etude and hopefully get it to a point where it's okay in my mind and move on to the next one. Let's just say I've had that book for a while. So there you have it, folks. That's my general practice routine nowadays for all of my woodwind instruments. If you have any questions or comments or anything like that, make sure you leave them down in the comment section. I always try to check those things regularly. Like, comment, like I just said, and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video. I'm gonna go practice oboe. Out.